Hello there. Welcome to Journey with Erika, and we are going to take you on a series of videos around traveling to the French Polynesia right now. Now, I know this year has been absolutely crazy. We've had so many trips canceled ourselves, so we were so excited when we were able to break away and actually head over to the French Polynesia ourselves back in November of 2020. So we are here to share all sorts of fun tips and tricks around how to get there yourself if you're interested in traveling there anytime soon. My name is Erika and I'm going to be your host today. In this first video, we're going to share 10 tips and tricks around traveling over to the French Polynesia right now. There are a lot of moving components to traveling right now, so we thought it would be beneficial to share with you several of our top tips that we learned on our recent vacation. All right, tip number 1 is all about that pre-travel COVID test. In order to be allowed into Tahiti, actually in order to even get on a plane to Tahiti, you need to have a negative COVID test, an RT-PCR test, not the rapid tests, not the antigen tests, but the actual RT-PCR test within 3 days of your departure. So what that meant for us, we were flying to Tahiti out of San Francisco on Tuesday. So that meant on Saturday we could go and get our tests. So my first tip for you all is around these tests. Here in the state of Wisconsin, we have pretty variable timing for getting our results back. So what we did to improve our chances of making sure we had our test results in time was we actually went and got 3 tests. The first test we went to, we paid for. It was through CVS. It was a test at the local CVS. The second test was paid for by insurance, and that was one that we found through Walgreens. And the third test was actually a free test site at a local drive-through test site with the local community hospital. And let me tell you, the next 3 days were a waiting period and a half. We got our first test results back on day 2. So on Monday morning, we got my husband's first test result back. Monday about lunchtime, we got his second test result back, of course, both negative. And then Monday afternoon, we needed to go ahead and start driving to Chicago because we were flying out the next morning. So we packed everything up and actually left the house without me having a negative test result. That was a very long 2.5-hour drive. But along the way, we did get several texts, both of those coming back for me as well as negative. So we were super excited. That night at the hotel, they helped us print out the paperwork for my negative test results. So that was super awesome. So we had 2 test results back. I will tell you the 2 that came back on day 2 were the Walgreens and the CVS. Had we only just done the free test through the local hospital, that result didn't actually come back until day 4. So definitely get yourself multiple tests. Check out, work with your travel advisor, work with your local health physician, and find out what are the opportunities that you can take, because definitely you do not want to put all of your eggs in one basket when it comes to getting your test results back in time. All right, tip number 2 is print everything out. In this day and age, I love having electronic itineraries. I have electronic apps for everything. But for this trip, we didn't want to take any chances and we printed everything out. I'm talking about your flight itineraries, your resort itineraries, your transfer itineraries, and most importantly, you want to have printed out your quick reference code from the island of Tahiti. You fill that out as part of your prerequisite. And you also want to have printed out your lab result that clearly states on the top that it's an RT-PCR and that it also clearly states that it's negative. So I will tell you, when we were in the San Francisco airport, there were so many guests that didn't have their tests printed out. You were not allowed on the plane, and they literally sent them back through security out to a printer where they could print their test result and have to come back. Nobody wants to deal with that kind of stress when you're traveling. So definitely take the time, print all those documents out ahead of time. And what we found really helpful was actually putting them in a plastic sleeve, because we could quickly pull it out of our backpack. And I had one for myself, we had one for my husband. One side was the quick reference code, the other side was the test results. Made it really easy so that the agents we were working with didn't have to actually fumble through the paperwork and touch the paperwork. We could just hold it up. They scanned it with their scanners and we went around our day. So definitely make sure you have everything printed out. And if you've taken multiple tests, go ahead and print out all the test results just so that you have them with you. All right, tip number 3 for traveling over to the French Polynesia is really when you're looking at your flight itineraries, stick with the bigger airports. We had originally booked our flights through our local regional airport that we love. It's close to home, it's super easy. And I'll tell you, those flights got changed time and time and time again, and eventually they ended up getting canceled altogether. So we were forced to go to a bigger airport, but I'll tell you, in the long run, right now that's probably the better option. Our regional airports are amazing, but trying to get connecting flights to match up is really quite hard right now. If you stick with the bigger airports, you're going to be able to ensure that you're going to start and end your trip on time. So definitely go ahead, save yourself some money. And while you will have to do a little bit more driving, it will be much better and a higher likelihood of you being able to take your trip if you stick with those bigger airports. Tip number 4 of traveling over to the French Polynesia. This is all about what you want to bring on the plane with you. Now, you definitely want to make sure you've got all those travel documents that we talked about in the previous tip, plus all of your actual documents, things like passports, driver's license, green cards. But on top of all that, you're going to want to pack extra snacks. I don't normally carry more than a couple packs of gum with me when I travel. So we really thought through the idea of a 4-hour flight, a 2-hour layover, and an 8-hour flight. We had heard a lot about how the airlines were or weren't serving food, and how a lot of the airport facilities weren't necessarily open. So we definitely packed a lot more snacks than normal. I packed things like beef jerky and trail mix and some granola bars. We also packed a few hard candies along as well. So just enough that would be able to get us all the way through till we ended up at the hotel over on Tahiti. You also want to make sure you're packing a couple empty water bottles that you can fill up at the airport water fill stations. You're going to want to make sure you've got enough masks with you on the plane. We packed 4 masks each of varying different textures and styles, a few cotton ones, a few disposable ones, because the airports are warm. Flights, sometimes they're warm, sometimes they're cold. We really wanted to make sure that we could change them out frequently throughout the day. And then lastly, we did bring hand sanitizer. Now, hand sanitizer was given to us everywhere. Sometimes I would go wash my hands just to wash the hand sanitizer off and start at a clean base. So hand sanitizer wipes and disinfectant spray and the gels, they are everywhere. But still, it's kind of nice to have your own just in case you don't want to go and freshen up before eating. So definitely make sure to pack your own snacks, water bottle, hand sanitizer, and a lot of masks along the way. All right, travel tip number 5. So despite even flying out of a big airport, we noticed that within the 48 hours before flying, that our flight numbers and airplane style, airplane type, changed quite a few times. We guessed that that was really due to the fact that there's not a lot of people flying right now, especially on these long haul flights. And so the airlines are doing their best to juggle plane inventory at each one of these airports. So don't be surprised if your flight number or your flight craft type changes. And why that's important is because a lot of times when the flight craft changes, your seat number will change as well. So the best tip for you here is going to be around making sure you've got your app downloaded for your airline and that you've got your alerts enabled, because that really quickly allowed us to go in and quick check where our seats were on the new plane and then change them if we wanted to. All right, my next tip is all about those airplane seats. United Airlines has come out and said that they're not blocking their middle seats anymore, but we didn't find that to be too much of a problem. Our flights were nowhere near sold out. So you definitely want to, when you book your flights, go ahead, pick your seats out. And then I would say about starting 2 weeks out from your flights, actually start going into that seat map, because we noticed that entire segments of the airplane started opening up. So there was definitely more than enough space on the plane for all of us to have our own rows or sit together in a row of 3. You just needed to be a little bit proactive about it. You can also check when you're at the counter. We saw several families getting moved around to be seated together, but also away from people. So definitely lots of space, but go ahead and take that ownership and check those things out on your app yourself. Speaking of seats, go ahead and check out upgrade opportunities. This is a once-in-a-lifetime trip for a lot of people to go over to the French Polynesia, so why not fly in a little bit more comfort? Whether that's upgrading to premium economy to get that extra legroom, or upgrading to first or business class to get those lie-down seats Both are great options to upgrade. You can always check out upgrade options online on your app. You can actually just select a different category of seat and it will tell you what the price is per person. But a tip that you might want to consider, especially if you're traveling now, because there is so much open space in first class, business class, and premium economy, you may want to check at the counter. We found out ourselves that it was actually cheaper to upgrade at the counter. We had checked the day before we were departing Papeete to come back to San Francisco. It's an overnight red-eye flight. We checked, and the seat upgrades to first class were showing at $6,600 a person. That is a lot of money to spend to be able to lay down flat, get a beautiful dinner, watch movies. But again, it was only an 8-hour flight. We checked at the counter. Those same seats were less than $800 a person. So if you're considering upgrading and you don't have that flight status, make sure you're asking at the counter to get those upgrade opportunities. Now, we have talked a lot about flying and tips and tricks to make flying easier right now. This next one is going to be all about the resorts. One thing you'll notice about the resorts is that they feel a lot like they did prior to the virus outbreak. The resorts over in the French Polynesia, they are very spread out to start with. We're talking about 40 to 120 bungalows at a lot of the properties. So not a lot of guests, but a lot of space to spread out. The service is fantastic. The restaurants are all open. The services are all there, like the spa and the activities. So you're not going to notice a lot of things being different other than you need to have masks with you at all times. So you want to make sure you're bringing enough masks. The French Polynesia can be quite humid and it does occasionally rain. So we planned for 2 masks every day per person. And then we had a separate stash of masks for our flights home. Because I'll tell you, it does, nobody wants to put a wet mask on, even if it's just been out in the rain. So you definitely want to make sure you have enough masks. And so as I mentioned, the resorts are fully operational. All of the activities, the excursions, they're all taking place. One of the things that all of the resorts offer are things like kayaks and canoes and snorkel equipment and tennis rackets. Now, a lot of these things, they disinfect, of course, in between each person's use. But my next tip is going to be about if you're going to the French Polynesia and you have the desire to snorkel a few times, buy your own snorkel set. Just the mask and the snorkel. You don't need to worry about getting flippers and all the rest of the equipment. But really, when it comes to snorkeling, you don't want to use someone else's snorkel to begin with. If you're traveling ever in the future to the Caribbean or to Hawaii, it's always a good practice to bring your own. You know what fits you know what fits right, and you know whose mouth it's been in. So tip number 9, buy your own snorkel set. They're not heavy, they're not expensive, they pack right into your suitcase. My last tip I'm bringing for you is all about your trip home. So we've already talked about you want to make sure you've got all your paperwork with you, you want to make sure you've got some extra snacks, you want to make sure you've got some masks, but more importantly, if you don't have a global entry pass, you want to download the mobile passport app. It's available on all of the smartphones, super easy to set up. It really just requires you to upload your passport information. What we noticed coming back through San Francisco, which we've done several times even prior to COVID, is it's quite a large haul. And a lot of times there's more than one plane coming in. And that global entry pass lane, never anybody in it. You pass right through. And the mobile passport lane, there's never more than maybe 2 or 3 people waiting in line. Whereas the rest of us, if you don't have either of those options set up, you're going to spend probably 45 minutes to an hour waiting to just go through the normal passport process. So go ahead, take advantage of this free application and the free process. Set that up so that you can easily pass through when you hit the United States. So what do you think? Any other tips that you would give to folks traveling right now? If so, leave them below in the comment section. If not, we really appreciate you taking the time to watch our video today. If you like what you saw and are excited to see more videos about Tahiti and traveling, go ahead and hit that subscribe and like button below. We really appreciate you tuning in today. Thanks.